Individuals and societies educators face a massive logistical problem. Every historical era, geographic region, and economic system comes with an overwhelming volume of complex chronological, geographic, and statistical data. The instinct is to try and cover all of this material, but racing through a timeline to ensure every event gets mentioned usually results in shallow, short-term memorization. The isolated data points quickly fade after the assessment. The MYP framework treats factual knowledge as a vehicle for building transferable conceptual understanding. Take the Industrial Revolution. We study this densely packed, polluted 19th century cityscape to examine the mechanics of systemic urbanization, rather than strictly memorizing a timeline of steam power. Those specific historical details act as raw material. Students use the facts of the era to construct robust mental models of broader concepts, like how rapid innovation drives both systemic change and social inequality. The focus of the classroom inquiry shifts. You move from asking what happened to asking why does this matter and where else does this apply? True disciplinary thinking requires moving past the simple recall of isolated facts. Students must learn to utilize that factual data to construct the analytical tools they need to make sense of the world. This shift in the classroom requires strict architectural planning. Conceptual teaching must be intentionally engineered into the foundation of the unit planner before a teacher ever steps in front of students. A common misconception is that key and related concepts are decorative tags or vocabulary words to copy down. They are active analytical lenses that students will use to dissect the topic. The anchor for this investigation is the statement of inquiry. A strong statement articulates a testable, dynamic relationship between ideas. Rather than stating, "we are learning about cities," it proposes that urbanization alters systems and generates inequality. This diagram shows the inquiry progression. First, factual questions establish foundational knowledge. Next, conceptual questions identify relationships hiding within that data. Finally, debatable questions rest on top, inviting evaluation and argument based on those uncovered relationships. Because this progression relies entirely on specific evidence, teachers must select their case studies purposefully. You choose a historical example specifically for the concepts it illuminates, rather than including it out of chronological obligation. A successful unit planner operates as a cognitive roadmap, ensuring every historical timeline or geographic dataset introduced serves the ultimate goal of building transferable understanding. Moving from the unit planner to the classroom, concepts require active cognitive engagement. Students have to manipulate the data themselves. The first pedagogical strategy is classification. Students are given raw evidence and tasked with grouping it, but they must strictly justify the logic behind the categories they create. In a migration unit, students examine this photograph. They analyze the luggage and demographics, sorting visual evidence into political, economic, or ideological push and pull factors. The final categories they write down matter less than the classroom debate over exactly why a specific piece of data belongs in one group instead of another. The second strategy is representation, which tasks students with translating abstract concepts into a visible format. This dynamic systems map demonstrates representation in action. If a class investigates globalization, they avoid writing descriptive lists. They map the exact flows of goods, people, and capital, illustrating how lines of interdependence expand and contract. The third strategy is generalization, the process of deriving broad, transferable claims from specific, localized case studies. By studying the protest signs and unified actions across multiple, distinct resistance movements, students extract a common pattern regarding how collective action challenges established power structures. These strategies move students from passive reception to active data organization, enabling them to detect the hidden architecture within complex events. We reach the highest levels of cognitive demand with the fourth strategy, concepts in use. This occurs when a student actively applies an abstract idea, like equity or power, to dissect a raw source. A student might apply the concepts of perspective and identity to evaluate a complex primary source, utilizing the central figure's expression to map historical bias. The ultimate metric of conceptual mastery in the MYP is the fifth strategy, near and far transfer. Near transfer tests the ability to apply a learned concept to a similar, adjacent context to build structural confidence. Far transfer requires a larger leap. It measures whether a student can apply that exact same concept to a distant, unfamiliar, or entirely contemporary issue. Looking at this antique Mercator projection, a geography student might use their understanding of colonial bias to spot the European-centric layout and the heavily distorted landmasses. Far transfer occurs when that student takes that same critical lens of perspective and applies it to a modern, data-driven satellite map, interrogating how current topography sets might still obscure human realities on the ground. The final phase of this pipeline is internalization. This is the point where analyzing systems, causation, or sustainability becomes an automatic, unprompted habit. True transfer is achieved when a student encounters a novel geopolitical crisis in the news and independently selects the correct conceptual tool to decode it. All of this pedagogical design must align precisely with assessment. If summative tasks only reward rote memorization, students will quickly deduce that conceptual thinking is optional. A conceptual assessment must demand higher-order reasoning. The tasks must require students to interpret raw data, synthesize evidence, justify their claims, and transfer their learning to a completely new context. Teacher feedback must shift alongside this. The priority is to evaluate the logic of the student's conceptual reasoning and generalizations, rather than focusing entirely on correcting surface-level factual errors.